Yeah, I know. More of this KGB document. But I'm having a blast going through this thing and just kind of trying to see what the mindset was of the people who wrote this. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is a declassified KGB document that came out in the 80s. And this document covers, it's not like some sort of crazy military secret thing and dealing with stuff like that, although I think there is a little bit of that. But this document is interesting because it covers the entire history of humankind. But it doesn't cover it in the sense of, oh, there's a big bang, and then, the earth forms, and then, evolution of people, and then now we're here. Like, it doesn't work like that. This document actually seems to take all kinds of occult research seriously, and it uses that occult research as well as scientific research, real scientific research, and it combines these to create a chronology of mankind, or of Earth. I guess we should just say Earth, because there's all kinds of stuff that happens here. This section I want to cover, it's called Section 4, Human Evolution, but it's not evolution in the sense that we are used to discussing it. In the sense of, hey, everybody started as an amoeba and now suddenly you're a human. That's not the kind of evolution it's talking about. I'm going to start reading here and set the stage, and then we'll pick it apart and kind of go over what they're talking about. So, to start here, this section is going to start 350 million years ago. Now, that might be fine if it was regular evolutionary theory, right? We could say, yeah, okay, humans started 350 million years ago, slowly evolved, and now, you went from scratching your butt like a monkey, and now you scratch your butt like a human. That's not what this is doing. This, right in the first sentence, goes like this. 350 million years ago, the so-called first etheric man was created. The very first line talking about humans is humans being created. Now, I get it. All of you atheists are probably thinking, oh, screw this document. This is going to be religious garbage. I'm better than that. I don't believe in a sky daddy. Blah, 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 blah. No, that is not what they're talking about. So, this document is fascinating because it takes, like I said, it takes the occult seriously in the sense, or not just the occult, but it takes the archaeology into account when it tries to explain or get a grasp on where mankind comes from. And that is, of course, the possibility of humans being created by some other life form. Now, before we start about to shut this off thinking this is going to be some sort of lame ancient aliens thing, two things. First of all, it's not quite that. And we'll discuss problems with the ancient aliens thing, right? So this we don't just buy into the garbage on this channel, right? We're not trying to push any sort of agenda here. We're just going to read this critically and see how it lines up with things that we know nowadays archaeologically, geologically, and historically, all of this stuff. Let's see where this document lands us. I realize that a lot of people think that this is probably some form of disinfo, and I completely agree, actually. So before we go further, I do agree that this document probably contains a good chunk of disinformation. So that's kind of a warning that as we go through this, I'm never taking all of this at face value, right? We'll take it at face value, but we don't believe it. Like, it's not like, oh, this thing says 350 million years ago, the first man was created, and that's for sure 100%. No, we're not doing that. Like, we're just going to read it, we're going to think critically about it, and we're going to take in the information. What I would say to those of you out there who are adverse to taking anything like this or looking at stuff like this in a serious matter, this would be my challenge to you. Look at this as a critical thinking exercise. A lot of the stuff, well, pretty much all of the stuff on this channel that we talk about is crazy, but it's only crazy if you're coming from a very mainstream westernized point of view, right? Once you push that point of view aside, you can start to open your mind to different things. Now, just because you are open to different things does not mean you have to believe it. And that's very important. I think a lot of people nowadays don't realize that just because you're entertaining an idea, that does not mean you believe it. And it's okay to entertain that idea, even if it's something that goes completely against what you believe. And in fact, these are the best exercises to do. If you generally have an aversion to, say, the whole Sumerian Enki myth, for example, right? Or even just the ancient aliens thing in general, push that aside, push that immediate hatred or aversion or whatever, push it aside and just stay neutral. Let's just read this document for what it is, and let's see what we can take out of it and what we can plug back into it from stuff that we have also learned recently. Because like I said, this document came out in the 80s. So obviously things have changed. Ideas have advanced, and so has science. And unfortunately, psychological conditioning programs have also advanced tremendously. And anyway. Let's start reading this and see what we get out of it. So here we're going to start talking about the creation of humans. And that's what this document claims. Humans were created. All right, so 350 million years ago, man was created. As follows from the texts of the Ahnenerbe almanacs, it was created in the indestructible sacred land of Agarte, or Agartha, as some of you might know it. Already interesting. So now we've got 350 million years ago, humans are being created. They haven't told us who created us yet, which is interesting. But we were created, and apparently we were created in Agartha. Inside the Earth, the cradle of humanity, by lunar ancestors, meaning the gods who lived on the planet Icarus, which perished 1.5 million years ago. All right, so they're saying our lunar ancestors created us. I don't know who they mean right now by lunar ancestors. If we're talking 350 million years ago, it would not be... Well, here, let's keep reading really quick because I think it's about to answer my question. All right, so the next sentence starts. The moon at the time was a satellite of Icarus, which orbited the sun at a distance of 2.3 AU, and the Earth rotated in an orbit distant from at a distance of 1.8 AU. Two satellites orbited the Earth, Lel and Faston. All right, really quick, if I sound like I just jumbled that sentence, by the way, this is a translated document and it's kind of weirdly translated, so bear with me. If some of the sentences are kind of disjointed, yeah, I am dumb, but, it's also, the document is also kind of scrambled a little bit. It's just an FYI, but that's why I'm posting it up here so you can see it. Anyway, so interesting. So we now have a picture of a planet Icarus, which I am not entirely sure we currently have an analogous planet that exists today of. I could be wrong, though. I don't know. Anyway, never really heard of a planet Icarus. And right now, there's in our solar system, NASA, they found some little asteroid thing and they call it Icarus. That's not what they're talking about. If you go and you try to look this up, this would be a legitimate planet. All right, whatever. Let's see what else we've got going on here 350 million years ago. Okay, so Earth has two moons, Lel and Faston. No clue about any of that. Oh, you know what? The moon thing, so in ancient research, there is, I believe it's in the Adam and Eve story. That's the book that the CIA classified. That book, that's another show, but that book supposes there would be a couple of moons as well surrounding Earth in relatively recent times, and that those moons crashed into Earth. So I don't know if there's a connection there or not. There actually might be some weird connections here between the government classifying or trying to hide the Adam and Eve story that was written, and then maybe the KGB doing something here. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just... Whatever. Let's keep going. There's probably nothing there. Maybe. I don't know. All right. Thus, it turns out that the gods who created man were from Icarus, i.e., our lunar ancestors. During this period, an isolated world was formed inside the Earth with a stable climate, not subject to external aggressive environment and natural disasters, with fresh water sources and acceptable temperature for the creation of living life forms. Interesting. So they're saying we were created at the center of the Earth. This is basically hollow Earth theory. Obviously, if we're talking about Agartha, this is obviously hollow Earth theory. Okay, for those of you who are about to shut this off because you think hollow Earth is weird, I agree. It is different. It is weird. But there's technically nothing unscientific about the Earth being hollow to some degree or another. It's really important to remember. Yeah, let's cover this crap before we go further. It's really important to remember that a lot of the things that mainstream science shies away from or just outright says is false is generally not false and not impossible. So, for example, the concept of a hollow Earth, if we're going to go this route in this document, we might as well set the stage for a hollow Earth being a real scientific possibility. Even more interesting is that a hollow Earth might actually be a requirement if we are to explain certain electromagnetic phenomena that we observe in our solar system. I mean, everywhere really, but and that's kind of a separate topic, and I'm not, Anyway, it's a scientific possibility, basically. Another thing is that, there's no reason. I know a lot of people are probably thinking hollow Earth is garbage, and the reason why you think hollow Earth is garbage is because basically mainstream geology has said so. Right? And even worse, mainstream cosmology and the way planets are formed would also pull people away from the possibility of planetary bodies having hollow centers or huge hollow spaces within them, right? We know for a fact that there's huge hollow caverns in the Earth, so that, that's not necessarily weird. But when you say something like, hey, yeah, the Earth might be hollow, one of the main reasons why people think that that's not going to be possible is because of how they've been trained in our Western academic landscape. For example, if we look at how right now mainstream cosmology believes planets are created through that accretion disk theory garbage. And it's an absolute garbage trash theory that has been disproven by observational data that NASA themselves have uncovered. Anyway, so if the accretion disk theory was correct, you just have a bunch of dust that eventually collates and then eventually, grows bigger because of gravity, and then you have a planet. Obviously, it would become very difficult to have a hollow center if that theory is correct. Well, good news, that theory is not correct, and that's a scientific fact. The accretion disk model has 0 predictions to its name. 0 successful predictions to its name. That's really important to remember. That mainstream science is trash in general, but in this arena, we already have the proof that the mainstream perspective on planetary formation and current planetary makeup is garbage. Like, they don't know anything. Anyways, so we can get rid of that. We can at least entertain the concept of a hollow Earth as a scientific possibility. And like I said, or I don't remember if I said or not, but from an electrical perspective, because of the way of electromagnetics and how that works, a hollow Earth might actually be required under certain circumstances. That gets a little weird, but anyway. Now, if you're wondering, well, how the hell do you get a hollow Earth? For those of you who are not familiar with the electric universe theory and how planets form, first of all, right up front, we don't have all the answers. That is for sure. Or at least I have not found anybody that has put together everything 100%. Very important to understand that we are still trying to figure this out. But what we are finding out, and where the evidence is basically pointing us towards, is that planetary bodies essentially might be either ejected cores of stars, brown dwarfs, red dwarfs, etc., or they don't necessarily have to be a core. It's entirely possible that, okay, so check this out. because a star is a plasma formation, right? A star is a Z pinch in a Birkeland current. So basically, you get a flash ball of plasma sitting there, like just burning and stuff. Now, because stars are an electromagnetic or a plasma phenomena, what happens is when you have that kind of electricity going on, you actually have the creation of other elements. Right, so right now, the popular thing to say in mainstream is, "Oh, we're all stardust. Every time a nova explodes, that's where we get all the elements from," and blah 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 blah. Right? If they blame on supernova and stuff like that, that's not necessarily the case, because you don't need a star to explode to create elements. The stars are creating elements in their just natural form. Right? You can see that in the spectrum. You can literally go see the spectroscopic readings of any star. Well, I mean, if you can get, look at the sun, for example, and you can see what elements currently exist in it. And you can see the traces of the other elements being formed due to the reactions. So what's also happening there, though, is over time you can potentially, I'm going to say potentially, you could potentially have all of that matter slowly building up inside that star, right? Inside that plasma envelope of that red dwarf or brown dwarf or star or whatever. Like, remember, I said this isn't locked down. I'm just kind of spitting here, throwing out some semi-science. I mean, it's backed up by science, but anyway. So as the stars are, being powered by the Birkeland current, they're creating other elements, and those elements have the potential to bind together within this plasma sphere itself. So these elements eventually coalesce into a large spherical planetoid, or all kinds of sizes, right? And then eventually that particular body is no longer electrically stable within that particular environment. And what does electricity do? Right? Electricity always tries to self-balance itself out. So eventually a planet will be spit out of that brown dwarf or star or whatever it is, whatever you're looking at, and then pow, you have a planet. Now, as that planet is being formed within the star, what you're going to have is your cathode, or a virtual cathode, that the elements are building around, right? And so what happens, that's basically an empty space. So as the elements build around this particular, virtual cathode, so to speak, you essentially get a spherical interior, an empty interior of a large planetary body, or any kind of a planetary body. That's one idea. Now, for those of you who are wondering, well, how the hell is electricity creating matter? This was proven at least in the early 1900s. German scientists figured this out. You can even go find newspaper clippings of it. They ended up searching for funding because what they did was they were doing experiments with electricity and plasma, and they were finding that their experiments were producing traces, very small traces, because their experiment was on a very small scale, but they were finding small traces of elements essentially popping into existence. And if you want to start talking about alchemy, we can start to kind of get into that arena a little bit, but it's not in a fictional way, but it's in a scientific way. Apparently, you can actually create other little bits of matter through plasma, and how you alter the energy and the power and all of that stuff, even to the point to where those scientists found that they were creating specks of gold out of nowhere. Very interesting stuff. I'm not going to belabor this point any further, and I shouldn't have even gone this far, because some of this is, well, everything I pretty much said has some sort of a scientific base to it. A little bit of it is still speculation. Like the planet thing being spit out of the stars, we're pretty sure the planetoids do get spit out of stars. Is that the exact way they're created? Honestly, I don't know. And like I said, I have not seen anybody, I don't think anybody truly knows yet exactly how all of that stuff works. My main point, after talking for 12 hours about this, is to point out that it is scientifically possible to have a hollow planet, and that a hollow planet would be possible for a planet to be created hollow due to the natural effects of electricity on, in plasma. Anyway, you know what I'm talking. The point is that it's possible. All right, shut up. All right, anyway, let's keep going on. Let's see where this crap takes us. The first people, if they could be called people at all, had a 52-meter etheric electric shell, so they were called the race of angels. They were asexual and reproduced by division. Oh, all right, well, we've gone in a completely different direction, but look at that. They're, right off the bat, they're already talking about electricity. Interesting. And I don't know what the hell this shell is, and they're dividing. Okay, so that's a completely other... All right, let's keep going. Let's see where this goes. What the hell? Human evolution is somewhat similar to a medical experiment. When a chicken, an embryo is grown from a broken egg in a laboratory petri dish, which is formed from the ethereal protein yolk mass compacting into a physical body. Similarly, the etheric race of angels, as a result of a long evolution, condensed into a physical body. Each root race included 7 sub-races. From the last 3 sub-races, the next root race arose. All right, now we've gone in a completely different area that I was not expecting. I have nothing to say about this yet. The etheric people of the first race ceased to exist as a result of the evolutionary advance of the Hyperboreans 110 million years ago. Damn, really? The evolutionary path of the angel race was 240 million years. Okay. Wow, all right, so now we're going to Hyperborea. All right, the second race, the Hyperborean race. Damn, we're already getting into the Hyperboreans? Jesus, all right. Let's see what these... All right, here we go. 200 million years ago, as a result of a long evolutionary cycle. So, I don't know if they mean evolutionary cycle in the sense that we look at evolution now in the mainstream, or if they might be referring to some other thing. I don't know. Anyway, let's keep going. Hyperboreans emerged from the last 3 sub-races of the first root race, a transitional race of people from a formless, etheric shell to a physical, condensed body. I wonder if they mean, like, we were pure energy or some crap and then slowly evolved into... I don't know, dude. Okay, I don't know. The height of the first Hyperboreans was 36 meters? Damn! At first, they were asexual and multiplied by division. It took another 82 million years for people of this race to reproduce by budding, and another 44 million years for them to reproduce by eggs. Hyperboreans ceased to exist as a result of the evolutionary advance of the Lemurians 18 million years ago. All right, so this is all unique. Let's keep going. Here we go. The third race, the Lemurian. You know what? Here, before we go to the Lemurians, it's interesting that they're talking about the Hyperborean race in the way that they're talking about Hyperborea at all, right? So Hyperborea, they're claiming, is a 200 million year old civilization or something. So, so for those of you who aren't too familiar with Hyperborea, Hyperborea was this supposed continent at the geographic North Pole of the Earth. And this continent was essentially split into 4 large circular island, or not, 4 large quarter sections of a circle, basically making, you know what I'm saying, a circle with made out of like 4 islands. I don't know what the hell you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean. Anyway, so it was up there. I don't even know why they're talking about the Hyperborean in this. So this is okay. Let's keep going. This is pure schizo at this point. Damn. All right, the third race, the Lemurians. All right, so the Lemurians, for those of you who are not aware, well, hold on. Let's see what they say about it. 28 million years ago, the Lemurian race appeared. From the very beginning of this cycle, people have been reproducing with eggs. At the same time, there were not only asexual people on Earth, but also animals. The height of the people was 18 meters. It took 100 million years for a bisexual androgynous person to appear. They must be talking about regular evolution. I see. Okay, so this thing claims that like some sort of etheric race was created 450 million years ago, and then, but why? What? All right, let's keep going. Okay, you know what? The reason why I'm going to keep going with this is schizo. I like this though, because I wonder if there's any grains of truth in this that the powers that be are trying to kind of obfuscate or bury. You know, the fact that we're seeing, okay, so I know 16 or 18 meter tall people sounds crazy, and I'm with you on that. But it's funny, this would not be the first place that I've seen people talking about giants that were that big. But I have a hard time with that size. I mean, all right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. All right. They consisted of a soft body that was permeated by magnetic currents. They had an indistinguishable sexual appetite, contributing to rapid reproduction. About the same way the bisexual individuals of sea hares reproduce, which did not evolve into same-sex mammals until our time. Hermaphrodites are still being born among people. Thus, according to the Ministry of Health of the RSFSR, 30 hermaphrodites were born in 1979. The internal organs of the early Lemurians were paired. They had 2 hearts, 2 livers, 2 spleens. One heart was responsible for pumping arterial blood, the other venous? Huh. Am I retarded? Is that a real Venus? I don't know, whatever. Okay. Lemurians had 2 throats and 2 stomachs. What's going on here? Protein food got into the acidic modern stomach, which secreted hydrochloric acid. Carbohydrate food got into the alkaline stomach, the remains of which are presented in the form of a modern pancreas. Both stomachs were connected by a duodenum passing into the intestine. So, alright, I would love to know how they are getting all of this biological information. Like, why even say this stuff? So, okay. This is where I would say the disinfo probably comes into play pretty hardcore. Because if you're a layman and you decide to read this, I mean, the 2 pages that we've just gone through here, I mean, dude, is what? I mean, it's it's tough. This is a tough one to buy into, right? I mean, why even say this stuff, right? This stuff all sounds like it's just an ass pull. Like they've just decided they're just gonna come up with some absolutely off the wall, just weird stuff and set the stage with something like that. Psychologically, what this would do, like I said, if you're a layman and you read this and you go through just these 2 pages, you're probably done, right? You're probably like, all right, I can't do this, bro. You can't be talking to me about 36-meter high people. You can't be just telling me that there's these weird other people in Lemuria that had duplicates of everything in their body and they produced by eggs. And I mean, what the hell were they doing this whole time? Another thing that's interesting so far is they're not talking about any events or anything. It's very basic as well, right? It's just Hyperboreans show up, they're 36 meters, it took them 82 million years to do something, and now we're at the Lemurians, right? This whole section is weird. It almost reads like they're setting the stage to filter out people from believing anything in this, right? So that's the first thing you could do. Like, this kind of stuff might delegitimize the entire document, and that may be what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to filter out the regular person so that the regular person will not look at the other stuff in the document, which actually has intellectual merit, scientific value, right? And it gets rid of them. So you lose a whole bunch of people right off the bat. And not only do you filter people out, but now those people have been psychologically coerced to now make fun of and basically have an aversion to anybody who believes anything in this document. Again, I mean, that's the point, right? It's the very simple tactic of discrediting a potential truism by placing it next to a off-the-wall crazy idea, right? So for an example, it would be like, you can't, if you question the science, you believe in flat earth, right? It's like, come on, really? Like, that tactic is used as a very simple way of basically divide and conquer. But what it does is it discredits a potential real idea. So if that might be what we're experiencing here. I don't know, but it's important to think about it, keep it in mind. Don't take it, I don't have any research. I don't know of anything that would technically back up anything that's been said here so far. Like, there's other stuff in this document, and we've covered it, that actually has a lot of scientific merit, and it has a lot of scientific backing and historical backing. So far here, this is just trust me, bro. Like, that's where we're at right now. All right. Now, let's see how much more crazy this will get. All right. The atmosphere on Earth was more ethereal and vaporous. Many metals that eventually became solid were in a liquid and gaseous state. What the hell was going on in Earth then? All right. The mind of the first Lemurians was latent with a strong physical life. Speech and self-awareness were absent. Man was a fighting beast. The focus of life force was in the area of the adrenaline glands and developed mainly resistance to shock. I don't know why. Okay. 18 million years ago, in the era of the Lemurians, an event of extreme importance occurred on the Earth. With a humanitarian mission, the Gods with Venus, great teachers, children of the flame, for the purpose of human development. All right? Their appearance was associated with the separation of the sexes and the onset of death in connection with, quote, the immersion of the people in solid matter, unquote, as well as the instilling in people the properties of individualism, since the previously people had a group consciousness and a collective mind, like ants. I guess. But if they were created, we still don't know why all of this was even created. See, okay, all right. The great teachers, quote unquote, disguised themselves as animal-like creatures, became leaders and priests in order to lead the younger humanity to the heights of spiritual perfection. There is speech, primitive crafts that were associated with the manufacture of skins of wild animals. Knowledge develops in various areas of life and the medicine. All right, so this is getting a little more schizo than even I am willing to accept. All right, so I want to keep going because we can actually use this as an example of things to be wary of. All right, okay, so I get it. Some of you out there are saying, well, how do you know this is not real? And honestly, at the end of the day, you're right, I don't know for a fact. But what I would say, and the reason why I would say that this isn't really holding any water with me anyways, is because at the moment I have not personally seen any scientific evidence nor historical evidence that would substantiate all of the stuff we have read so far in this section of this document. There's other sections of this KGB document that are absolutely insane with facts backed up by science and history. But this kind of stuff, man, I don't know, dude, this is pushing it even for me. But that's the only reason why I would say it's pushing it for me. Or not even just pushing it, but like this is the kind of stuff that I feel would be the misinformation or the disinformation that is pushed out there by various agencies to essentially make real ancient historians, I mean like real historians, not mainstream historians, but real ancient historians who are looking for the truth. Those people who are getting closer to the truth, there are definitely institutions that are not interested in having those people reveal certain secrets, I would say. And the reality is that's one of our huge problems when we get into ancient historical research. It's not just that we have to fight the lack of information that would just generally dissolve over time, but we literally have to fight against groups, institutions, etc. that exist out there who, for one reason or another, are doing everything they can to obfuscate history, right? And for a multitude of reasons, which, unfortunately, most of the reasons are probably not in your and I's benefit. But anyway, this might be a tactic that is being used to discredit any other kind of ancient research that would show a completely different direction than what is currently in the mainstream. So, this stuff here, it's definitely on the crazier side, if for no other reason that we're talking in hundreds of millions of years, and by all historical account, and by all scientific account, real science, not mainstream garbage, but real science, we have no reason to believe that our history goes back hundreds of millions of years. I'm not saying it's not possible, and I get there's a whole group of thought out there who, I forgot that guy's name, Michael Cremo, I believe. He's one of those guys that leads that charge into saying that humans were around, hundreds of millions of years ago. But, where these hundreds of millions of years come from, the evidence that these people base that kind of a time period on are weird, anachronistic artifacts that are discovered. For example, if footprints are found in some sort of a shale rock or something, if geologists decide that shale rock is, 200 million years old using their garbage dating methods, then alternative researchers tend to latch on to that date, even though that date's it's not possible to get a date like that. There's no way to reliably believe in that date. But, mainstream alternative researchers will latch on to that kind of a situation because it fits in with their pet theory. So, for example, there is a school of thought out there right now that humans, in our form, you and me, existed, 100, 200, 300 million years ago. And, the reality is I have not seen the real evidence to substantiate that. Not only that, and not just scientifically, historically as well, right? I don't want to say that this doesn't exist, but you don't find our ancestors saying, hey, 100 million billion years ago, God started this, or 100 bajillion years ago, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather started that. Like, we don't see that in any of the ancient historical literature. It's just not there. Everybody is very much in agreement with each other to where they say, hey, this stuff started just a little bit ago. And it started not through a slow evolutionary period where you start at nothing and you slowly work your way up. The reality is the evidence shows that humanity starts at the top, at a scientific pinnacle, and then has its ups and downs from there for various reasons. Anyway, let's keep reading this because this, I don't know, it's pretty schizo, and, that's all we do on this channel at this point. So let's see how crazy we can get. All right. It continues. Evolutionary transformations are taking place in the animal world. All right, so this must really... All right, so I guess what I said was wrong, that this document does consider evolution in the sense that is believed by the mainstream now. I think. They don't say that, by the way. I mean, the reality is they say that, the first beings of ethereal nature were created, and they don't say who created it. That's interesting, too. Anyway, let's go on. The number of species has grown significantly. However, some animal species became bisexual over time. Such representatives of the animal world as plesiosaurs and pterodactyls were contemporaries of the Lemurians until the end of the third race. Really? So are they saying that... Okay, all right, hold on. According to the information provided by German scientists during this period, there were 2 million plant species, 4 times more than the current flora on the planet. 9,000 species of fish and invertebrates, 1 million species of birds, 3 million species of animals, and about 400,000 anthropomorphic creatures. Damn. A total of 4.9 million species. All right, so check this out. That would probably actually be backed up by real scientific evidence, or I should say it is backed up by real scientific evidence. It's just they're getting their dates, well, I would guess they're getting their dates from mainstream chronology instead of real chronology. So the only reason why I say that there's probably a lot of truth in that animal population situation here is because when we actually do go, the further back we go back in time, not very far, by the way, not very far, but as the further back we go back in time, we find that Earth was legitimately populated by infinitely more life than what we have today. That's a scientific fact. There's no real arguing that. So this is taking that into account to some degree or another. But on the real science side, we find when we start to look at those records, using real science, not mainstream garbage. I know I've said that 8,000 times, but it's important to remember. But if we look at the real chronology science, what we find is that the Earth was absolutely flourishing with all kinds of flora and fauna, just 10, 12,000 years ago. And the reality is, it's probably a little sooner than that, because if we really dive into real chronology, if we take an honest look at the evidence that we have for flora and fauna, just, back in the day, the evidence really does support only a few thousand years ago Earth was it was only a few thousand years ago that Earth was hugely more populated by today's standards. I mean, just vastly more populated. That's kind of another subject for another time, but that would coincide with what they are talking about here. Our only problem dealing with this is the fact that they're throwing this back, hundreds of millions of years, which we don't need to do. There's no real reason for it because the scientific evidence doesn't require that. We know only in the past few thousand years, 10,000 years maybe, 6,000 years maybe, that the Earth had tons more life. Crazy. It was insane. All right, anyway, let's keep going. What do we got? Blah, 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 blah. In the modern biosphere, there are 200, the remaining 400,000 species of primates out of only 4 anthropomorphic. Gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and gibbons. If we take into account that the planet was covered with multi-tiered vegetation, then it is likely that such a number of anthropomorphic creatures and species of wild animals lived directly in the crowns of giant trees and distributed this fauna in their territories. The first educated, quote-unquote, and dedicated, quote-unquote, people voluntarily gave up animal food, developing self-control over instincts and undying sexual appetite. The humane mission of the gods from Venus ended with the replacement of their own teachers by dedicated people, in much later the times of the Atlanteans. Oh. Really? All right, so we've moved on to the people, the gods from Venus. I don't know what these guys are referencing here. One of the things that I have to admit is that I have not seen any kind of real evidence that claims that Venus, for example, was habited by other species of animals. I haven't seen the evidence for that, but I also haven't really seen any kind of ancient historical data that would support any reason to even make that claim, in all honesty. I mean, why specifically from Venus? This is the kind of stuff we have to be careful of, because this sounds good, especially to an alternative researcher, right? You hear something like, oh yeah, the gods from Venus, yeah, the people from Venus, way back in the day, you know, when Venus was full of life and stuff, or something like that. You know, you can actually use that particular direction and correlate it with, unfortunately, mainstream data that may actually support the possibility of living life, you know, back in 100 million years on Venus. The problem with that is, okay, well, so the problem with that is that can be used to throw people off the track. Because once again, we're mixing disinformation with mainstream science, in quotes. And then, unfortunately, that can build up a confidence psychologically that shouldn't really be there, right? You kind of start to build pet theories out of information like that. So be careful of that. I'm not saying that life was not on Venus. Hell, I'm not even saying life isn't on Venus right now. All I'm saying is that when you read something like this, just be careful. Because what is substantiating this, right? I'm going to have to go and dig to see where the hell they find why they decided to present this information at all. I have to go look into, I don't know if it's the Ananurbe or whatever, but I'll go check that out. Okay, let's keep going. Oh yeah, and now we're talking about the Atlanteans taking over for the gods of Venus. I mean, okay. Where did that come from? All right, let's keep moving on. All right, most of the Lemurians remained uncouth, with undeveloped intelligence and an inextinguishable sexual appetite. Bestiality was widespread. It is for this reason, as it should be considered, that the first monkeys became the product of sexual activity of Lemurians. Modern people of the white race have 46 chromosomes. Blacks and Mongols have 48, which indicates their later origin as a human species, unlike Lemurians. I wonder, I don't know if that logic flows either, because chromosomes, I don't know, have evolutionists linked the amount of chromosomes something has to a specific growth time period or evolutionary time period? I don't know about that. I'll have to look into that too. All right, where are we at? Okay. So the number of chromosomes of a species allows you to establish its old age. I don't know about that claim. I don't know if even evolutionists make that claim. Do they? I don't know. I've never heard of that. I've never heard an evolutionist say, the more chromosomes you have, the later you are in development. That doesn't even make sense, actually. All right, anyway. Insects have 6 chromosomes, and the Drosophila fly has 4. Chimpanzees that have white skin under wool, 46 chromosomes. In a gorilla with black skin, 48. Based on this, it can be assumed that chimpanzees descended from Lemurians and gorillas from Negroes. This is also evidenced by the fact that the 12 to 13 chromosome is not entirely identical to the 2 pair of chromosomes of a white person. I don't know. The late Lemurians erected megalithic stone structures that have survived to this day in Peru and England, Stonehenge, and other parts of the world, and also learned the basics of construction from quote-unquote great teachers. So, all right, they're giving the Lemurians credit to megalithic structures in England and in Peru, huh? And all over the place, really. So, for Lemuria, generally speaking, for those of you who are not familiar with it, Lemuria is supposed to have existed basically over there in the Indian Ocean kind of area, kind of between East Africa, North India, not South India, Jesus Christ, North Australia, New Zealand, that area, the Indian Ocean area is where Lemuria, if there was a continent there, it's supposed to have existed there. So my question would be, if this document is real, why are they giving Lemurians credit to the structures all over the planet when we do not have, not that I've seen anyway, any kind of historical evidence that would credit a Lemurian specific civilization to building all of those structures. I don't know why this book would give credit to specifically the Lemurians, especially like a million years ago, 100 million years ago. That's a weird one too. So that's some stuff to watch out for. I don't know. Anyway, okay, let's keep moving. The basis of the construction was based on the principle of cutting, quote unquote, a solid mountain and rock by enriching them translationum powder. Translationum powder? Obtained by dissolution of gold at a temperature of 5,500 degrees. They don't say Celsius or otherwise. With the help of a giant tongs, VA jar of category, weapons of the gods. See, this is getting cut up. Sorry, guys. That's literally what it says. Carried out large-scale melting of gold in the field of construction and extraction megablocks. So that's a weird paragraph, sorry, but it sounds like they used giant tongs. I don't know what VA jar of category means, and I don't know. Let's keep going, see what we can get out of this. Thin gold plates were superimposed on the rock and evaporated by electric arc for 70 seconds. When the plates flashed with bright light and turned into powder, the stone could be cut like plastine and molded into any shape. Now that's fascinating. All right, so remember, the best disinformation always should carry a hint of truth. So when we look at, well, I mean, basically, pretty much most megalithic structures around the world, we don't know how they carved a lot of this stuff. Even more interesting is a lot of those megalithic blocks that are found everywhere, right? They fit together in weird geometric patterns. That's one of their main claims to fame there. One of the other things that is weird about those blocks is not only do they fit perfectly somehow, but they're also very a lot of them are very roundish, sort of. And then some of them even have like a little hump that sticks out. Nobody is quite sure why they look like that. Nobody has really, in my opinion, presented a 100% scientific-based, factual way of creating stones in the way that the ancients did. But one of the theories that does exist is that somehow, I don't know how, but somehow the ancients were able to take a piece of rock, a huge piece of rock, and then apply something to it and then make it moldable like clay. And that's really what a lot of the megalithic features look like when we start looking around the world, is they do look like they were just kind of formed out of clay, thrown into place, and then, left to harden or whatever. However, the only problem with that is that the vast majority of megalithic structures are not clay. I don't think any megalithic structure is technically clay, or what you would call a megalithic structure. But most of most of these blocks are, the granite. And that's not, granite does not magically mold. That's not what happens. But I suppose it's entirely possible. I have no reason to think it's not possible that there might be a method that could soften the stone and then allow you to work with it, put it in place, move it, hell, even cut it in half or multiple parts, then remold it in place and then have everything fit together. That's a theory that is fairly prominent nowadays in alternative research. The only problem with that theory is that nobody's duplicated it, to my knowledge. I haven't seen anybody duplicate it, and there's also a couple of different ways that people think it happened. So this is interesting that they actually tell us how they molded the stone. I've never heard of this method. So they take a sheet of gold, electrify it, it turns into a powder, and then they can cut it like plasticine. Plasticine, huh? Very interesting. The other theories, another theory that I've heard about molding the stone is through some sort of a use of a plant that used to exist that they could break down and then apply to the stone, and then the stone would become malleable. But once again, I haven't seen it, and I mean, link it to me if you got it. I would love to see it. But it's interesting that this document brings up the possibility of the megalithic structures being molded and not carved. I find that fascinating. All right, let's keep going on. Okay, so the stone could be cut like plasticine and molded into any shape. Gold, purified by fire, and that's in quotes for some weird reason, as the Aztecs called it, was used in the movement of giant monoblocks and stone platforms. The powder was poured onto the slab, then a certain high-frequency sound and vibration was produced, which made it possible to move huge stone platforms through the air. A similar method was used in the construction of the pyramids. Oh, so they even talk about how they moved those things. So they would purify the gold by using fire in quotes. It makes me wonder if that's a plasma situation. Plasma's fire. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like what? And if they're running electric arcs, if they're running an electric arc, can't speak, an electric arc through gold to make the stone malleable, then I'd say there's a good chance that they would have used electricity in some form or another to move the stones as well. And here they're talking about sound and vibrations. That's a whole another thing that the alternative grabs onto, that they believe that the stones were essentially anti-gravitied around the area to get moved into place. There just hasn't been a scientific way of doing that presented yet that I've seen. But one of the ideas is that you would use sound and frequency to vibrate, and then, the stone would somehow move. I don't know how that works, and I haven't seen anybody recreate it yet, but that's the idea. So it's in here. So it makes me wonder if some of that's true, right? Because sounds interesting. I mean, the fact that they're talking about electricity, sound, vibration, those are all key to, they're key to everything. So if you have an understanding of those properties and you can manipulate those properties and principles, you could probably do a lot of stuff. So it's entirely possible that back in the day, these guys had some crazy thing they were doing to build all of this stuff or mold stone. That's not impossible. So that's probably one of the more realistic parts of this entire section. Now, it looks like the next section is a section that we already covered, so we'll stop here. But the main takeaways from everything we just read here are, I'd say the number one takeaway here is to make sure that you are not being strung along by campaigns of disinformation. I would honestly argue that this section that we just went over is a real good example of a potential misinformation campaign. We see some possible truth in here, using electricity, vibration, sound to move and form blocks. Interesting, fantastic. Actually probably has some sort of scientific base. But the other stuff we're talking about here, the way they describe how life kind of evolved, quote unquote, with the Lumerians and these weird other beings and, different. And then, of course, there's the Hollow Earth portion. The Hollow Earth portion, I want to go over more of that later. Not because I believe in Hollow Earth. I'm not trying to push Hollow Earth. I'm open to it, but I have not seen the evidence for it. But I do find it interesting that anybody would waste their time going into a little more depth, talking about it in a relatively scientific fashion. Like I said, there is science to be found dealing with Hollow Earth. It's there. It is there. Anyway, we'll have to look into that later. We'll have to see what's up. This document, okay. We're done. I've talked long enough. This is like an hour long of me blabbing, whatever the hell. All right, so we'll call it here. And, of course, don't forget to take your meds, right? Don't worry. The government will supply you with tons of them. And if one doesn't work for you, there's always other chemical ways to destroy your brain, because that's what happens to people who listen to and believe in any of this stuff. We can't be thinking on our own, right? Okay, all right, we're done.